I thought we'd start with After's Explorer's talents that he put together, and then your kind of take on those.
Yeah, no, I think this is a great idea. So let me just give you the bit of a primer here, folks. So
my apologies.
Pete, how could you have a phone?
I don't think that's ever happened before. I always have my phone on silent. Very strange.
But yeah, so this is a concept for Explorer's talents, which are a class feature variant for the Ranger. This is kind of After's ideas were inspired by a recent Unearthed Arcana supplement. For those unfamiliar, Unearthed Arcana is the official Wizards of the Coast homebrew, I guess, that they put out, right? It's stuff that they are thinking about putting on future books and that they want players' feedback from. So this was something that After saw the new Ranger features in the Unearthed Arcana and said, hey, I want to do these too, and came up with this. So Explorer's Talents is a feature meant to replace a Natural Explorer. And as you can see, there are quite a few talents to choose from.
Yes. So the kind of core mechanic here was, you choose 2 talents as it was put out by After. This was in the workshop channel on our Discord. So as I mentioned before, we're going to be perusing that for people who have ideas and going through them like this one. So the idea was at level 1, you'd pick 2 of these, and then at various levels as you progressed through the Ranger class, you would get additional talents. And some of these are really, really flavorful, and I like a lot of what he was kind of working with here, especially in terms of the style. There's a general sense for me in reading these that all of them are meant to be a Ranger who's used to moving around a particular area. For the most part. I think there's a couple exceptions there, but ones that really kind of stand out are Arctic Explorer. You're adapted to cold climates and you gain resistance to cold damage. Or the kind of comparable Desert Walker, which is you're adapted to hot climates and you gain resistance to fire damage. Or Grassland Runner. You are a Ranger that's from the open plains. You're very quick in kind of an open area. Your speed increases by 10 feet. Your jump distance is doubled. I really like, to start out with what I think worked really well in this, I really liked the idea of kind of like the Circle of the Land Druid having a terrain that they're most used to, the Explorer having several different terrains that they're useful, because that's what a Ranger is at heart. They explore the wilderness. They're good at moving around the wilderness, and that doesn't really come across in the Natural Explorer feature as it is originally.
Yeah, and well, let's talk a little bit before we really evaluate these. Let's take a quick minute to look at what the Natural Explorer feature really does, right? The whole point of Natural Explorer is you pick a couple of terrains, you pick one, and of Arctic, coastal, forest, desert, grassland, mountain, swamp, or the Underdark. Already huge problem, because if you pick one terrain and it doesn't come up in your game, your whole feature is useless. So that's already a huge issue with the base feature. And then, even then, the abilities it gets, difficult terrain doesn't slow your group's travel. You're never going to notice that, right? If that ability ever comes into play, you're not going to realize it. So that's a feature that doesn't feel good. Your group can't become lost except for magical means. Becoming lost and finding new things being while you're lost, that's part of the exploration pillar of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, right? Is discovering unexpected things in your travels. So you're kind of removing that pillar of gameplay. So that's a huge problem for it. And it has some other, mundane issues, but what it really comes down to is there's not a lot in the Natural Explorer class option for the Ranger that really feels good and is fulfilling as an explorer. That's being your goal, to explore and to be the master explorer of your party. So that was the whole reason for why these come into place in the first place. I think we need that context of the goal here is to give you more generally useful features that
reflect that you explore and that you're accustomed to these environments, while also being applicable when you're not necessarily in that environment.
Exactly. Now, I see some people in the chat, Chill Pandana, saying, the keen senses seem super powerful.
Absolutely. And this was, I think, probably the largest of the issues with this feature, is that a lot of these are a little bit more powerful than I think Natural Explorer was ever intended to be. Natural Explorer is a feature that interacts with, as Jeremy was saying, the exploration pillar of gameplay. It's for the interaction phase. But there are, not only is there perception expertise, which is really good, there's a lot of these features that are interacting with the combat side of gameplay. And in that kind of flavor one, there's definitely some differences in between different features in here, where some of them do things like camouflage. You get a disguise kit, and you have checks that allow you to blend in better with natural foliage, which you're going to have some rangers, for example, if you had two rangers using this feature and one took that, and another one took, for example, cold resistance, the person who took cold resistance is just getting more of a power boost, while the other person is just getting this kind of utility, more flavor option. So I like to see when all of these features, I'd like to see all of them be hitting the same pillar, all of them be more flavor and utility for what the region is.
Yeah, that being said, there are some really great ones. Like, for example, naturally adapted to hot climates. That is a mechanic that specifically relates to something very specific in the Dungeon Master's Guide, which is getting exhaustion because of extreme heat. And that's something that your Dungeon Master might never use. The Goliath has a similar feature, and that's a race. And, you know, I totally get that. And having that on there is nice. It's something just to emphasize I'm a desert walker in this case. But it does need something more active than that. And resistance to fire damage is a good start, but like Pete was saying, maybe a little too powerful for a level 1 class feature.
And Malkara here is saying, I think Keen Senses should probably just have advantage rather than double, might balance that out in a 5e homebrew. My issue with Keen Senses is actually, it's just entirely Keen Senses in a lot of ways. Because unlike a lot of the other ones on this list, Keen Senses is something that's internal. It's not about you having adapted and learned to explore and to move through a particular environment. Keen Senses is kind of out of the flavor for me of what an explorer's talent might be. You know, I would rather see maybe something, for example, Mountaineer. I would rather see something about, you know, you can see farther if you're on a mountain, like you're used to looking out into distances, or something like that's more on flavor for being related to exploring rather than something that's just universally applicable.
Yeah, but overall, I think this is conceptually an incredibly strong direction. And even mechanically, there are still a lot of really good features here. They're just, some of them are a little too powerful, some of them are a little too, maybe too flavorful, right? Not too flavorful. God, I don't want to say not too flavorful. Too flavorful is always good, but too just being flavor, too ribbon-like, right? A ribbon is a little thing that doesn't really have any power, but it's fun that you might give to a class or a race or a spell or something.
Yeah, and definitely a pretty
too much like that.
A pretty extreme dichotomy between these, where there's ones like your jump distance is doubled and you have 10 feet bonus speed, and then there's other that are like you can better in handling animals and stuff like that. So I actually really like Friend of the Wild. It's one of my favorites on here.
It's weird we're gonna see something like that again.
So without further ado, Jeremy, would you like to present your kind of take?
Yeah.
Or would you like to talk about the other half of this first?
Yeah, let's talk about Hunter's Eye. Oh, you have your cat thing down here.
Don't worry about that cat. We'll come back to that later.
Ignore the cat, guys.
I just put it on one document, so you didn't have to have 10,000 documents opened.
So, Pete, what is Hunter's Eyes? This is another feature that Asteroid came up with, and also, you know, a pretty good feature. I think it's kind of based on the variant option from the Unearthed Arcana, right?
Absolutely. This is, well, for starters, a play on the favored enemy feature of the Rangers. Which is another level 1 feature. You get it at the same time that you get Natural Explorer, and it gives you a little bit of a boon when tracking or hunting a particular type of enemy. For Rangers in the kind of player's handbook as it originally is, those are like aberrations and beasts and celestials and fae, and basically any type of creature that you could pick, or alternatively 2 types of humanoids of your choice.
But what's the problem with that? What's the issue with the existing favored enemy? And why do a lot of people want an alternative option?
One, it doesn't really do all that much. All it really gives you is advantage on survival checks to track enemies of that type, which is pretty niche in its doing. And in addition to that, that's the same problem that we were talking about with Natural Explorer. What if your dungeon master doesn't run enemies of that type? For example, if you choose that you're only going to hunt oozes and then you never run into an ooze in your campaign, then you just kind of had a feature that was pretty meaningless. Yeah. And that can feel really bad.
And even beyond that, tracking enemies, that's something that a lot of campaigns just won't have. You'll not be tracking your opponents through the wilderness. A lot of the times you'll run into them in a dungeon and be like, oh God, an ooze, and you'll have to fight it. And this feature doesn't give you any bonuses to actually fighting oozes. So that's one of the big reasons a variant option for favorite enemy, something that would replace it for the hunter, for the ranger rather, is maybe a good idea. So Pete, you want to talk about Hunter's Eye?
Yes, let's go back. I got so many documents open on the subject of having a lot of documents open. All right, so this iteration of Hunter's Eye, the flavor on it's cool. With your keen hunting instincts, you can track into your opponent's movements and kind of basically get a lock on an enemy. And then mechanically, as a bonus action, you can choose a creature within 120 feet of you and mark it. When you make a weapon attack against a marked creature, alternatively, you can choose to apply the mark then, as this is written here. And then you can maintain the mark for an amount of time equal to half your ranger level in hours, rounded down, which I think at level 1, okay, minimum of 1. That's why it has the minimum of 1 there. Very good. So you have advantage on any checks made to perceive or track or gain insight on your quarry. So perception, survival, insight, which is an interesting one on insight, which isn't something I would necessarily think, because it almost implies that you can socially track your enemy, where if you're having a conversation around the dinner table, you can put your hunter's eye on someone there and be better at perceiving their issues, which is maybe a touch too strong in utility there. And then it functions like Hunter's Mark. In addition to that, when you hit them, you deal an extra 1d6 damage to your quarry when you hit them with a weapon attack. And ends if you use the mark again.
Yeah, so pretty straightforward. It's you pick a creature and you wreck them. You do better against them in every way. And I don't know. I think that's cool, but I don't know. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I would like to see this being a much more combat-oriented feature, because if I want to be a hunter, I want to feel like a hunter, But now, that's me.
I can't quite remember it off the top of my head. Do you know how this compares to the comparable feature in the Unearthed Arcana that was done?
The Unearthed Arcana is just you get Hunter's Mark. Just Hunter's Mark.
It's like a non-concentration Hunter's Mark. Was that what it was?
Yeah, and they've already said that's not going to happen in the final product. They're going to put concentration on whatever it is.
Interesting.
So
it was a direction that I actually really liked for it, that they were going. But fair enough. This is more in that style. This is a non-concentration feature.
A kind of related kind of conversation going on in chat here. Malkara was saying, do you think the DM should try to incorporate some of the characters' background / feats into their campaign? And I imagine choices like a favorite enemy or a favorite terrain, or natural explorer terrain, would be a really good thing to try and incorporate, right? If you know that one of your players is playing a hunter, ranger, or a ranger, and they say, man, I really want to fight dragons. Put dragons in your game. That's a really cool way of making sure that your player gets that moment to be like, oh, that's my thing. I get to do this, guys, right? They get their moment to shine. And, sometimes it doesn't always work. If you know that you want to play in a game that's super undead heavy and your player picks aberrations and constructs as their favorite enemies, and you're like, man, I don't want to have robots or golems in my undead game because it's a zombie apocalypse or whatever, right? That's something that maybe as a dungeon master, you should talk to that player about it and say, hey, this is kind of what I had in mind. And this is a bigger kind of overarching thing about, communication with your players and dungeon masters. And then, yeah, exactly what Chill Pandana was saying. A DM should make the players feel their choices and decisions and give them benefits at the same time challenging them. Yeah, exactly. You don't want to just give someone something for free, but you want to give them a...
when your player has something like this, when you can, you should try and, give them a chance to use it.
Delmith, do we still do the Friday night one-shot adventures?
Goodness.
Of course we do.
Pete and Jeremy's D&D time.
Yeah, Pete and Jeremy's D&D time every Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. I never say it that way, but I did it that time. We play 3 one-shot adventures featuring our viewers. That's you guys. So come on by. Play some D&D with us.
And sign up.
With we. Oh boy. God, I thought we were saying us.
And another thing, Blood Deuce is pointing out, which kind of touches back to one of the things we were talking about on our rubric, actually, which is one problem that he sees with Hunter's Eye, is that it doesn't specify that it's like Hunter's Mark, so it stacks with Hunter's Mark, which is potentially problem. I'm not like 100% certain that I see that as a problem. I'm a little on the fence about how strong that is, but that's definitely comes in the category of thinking about the balance, not just inherently in what it is, thinking like, oh, well, this is the same as Hunter's Mark, so it's probably balanced. Thinking about the balance in the greater context of the system is an important part. So that's a very good point, Blood Deuce. And that's definitely something to think about, the implications of those two things stacking when you're designing this.
Yeah, and sign up for Pete and Jeremy's D&D time for Della is asking. They close Wednesday evening at midnight, and it should be your local time, I hope. So go ahead to dndtime.stream and sign up today. That link hopefully should work, I think. Right? Yes, that's the correct one. You can just sign up right here on our website. If you're a new player, just check new player and make sure to put your stuff in there. But yeah.
Great. So Jeremy, I think we've talked about this version, this original After version. Let's take a look at the version that you kind of put together here.
Yeah, so I was super inspired by After's concepts. I thought the Explorer's Talents was a really cool way to take your Ranger and take that Natural Explorer idea, which the whole point is you're a little bit specialized, and this is a way to make your character kind of unique, and flush that out with more options. So this is my class feature variance Ranger take on that.
And before we go further with this, I also just want to take a moment. I don't know if After's here, but I still want to just say, After, thanks so much for sharing this with us.
Absolutely.
And kind of letting Jeremy work with it so much here and see what he came up with, because I've already read this and I really like what you came up with, Jeremy.
Yeah, I mean, this is another take. It's a little bit more complicated. There's a lot of, some flavor text here, but basically the idea is I wanted to keep the progression the exact same. After had changed it up a little bit, where you would gain talents regularly as you level up. I wanted to keep it as much as I could along the Natural Explorer progression table. So at level 1, when you get Natural Explorer, you get to pick 2 of these, and then at 6th level you get an extra one, and at 10th level you get a 4th one. So eventually you're going to have 4 of these, and you get to pick 4 of these Explorer's talents. So I took a lot of those concepts that After had started, and I wanted to flush them out a little bit. Oopsies. To give them a little bit, both more specificity, but also general applicability. So here's one, Death Stalker, right? You can sense the mark of unseen evil upon the land, and as an action you can detect whether any land that you see has been desecrated. That's a very niche ability, right? But maybe that'll be really interesting. Maybe at some point that'll be really applicable to your campaign. And then additionally, undead cannot gain advantage on ability checks and saving throws made to resist the effects of your spells and ranger spells and abilities.
I was a big fan of that design. I don't know if that's something that you borrowed from something existing, but no, I like
that's all me.
Yeah, that's a really good design space, and I can imagine using that language, cannot gain advantage made to resist the effects of, being a design
that could be
you would come back to and use regularly on features over the course of the time that we're doing here. I thought that was a clever piece of wording.
Yeah, and that ties into the whole point. Desecrated terrain, right? It gives undead advantage on saving throws. That's just one of the effects of desecrated terrain. I always thought only holy ground sites could be desecrated. Yeah, and maybe that's the key. Maybe that's something you decide in your campaign. What desecration is very vague in the Dungeon Master's Guide.
Yeah,
you might decide that it's just an area of vile necromantic power. And I don't mean like necromancer wizard. I could be a good guy, but use necromancy power. I'm talking about like the bad undead wizard.
That mean necromancy.
Yeah, and so basically this mechanic is good against all undead, a very broad category of creature type, but it ties into that core feature. The next one is Forager. This is a much more flavorful option, but I think it's still a lot of fun. I personally love it. Oh, whoopsies. But the mechanic is, over a short rest in non-magical wilderness, you can craft some of the following items using foraged materials. The foraged materials foraged items have no value and deteriorate after you use them. And so you can get torches, right? You can get ammunition for your weapons. You can create a rain catcher or water skin, a simple flute or dice set, or a 2-person tent or comparable shelter. This mechanically doesn't have a lot of value, except the torches and the arrows, if you're tracking ammunition, are mechanically very good. But the whole point I thought is just, I added a little flavor in there, like the flute and dice set. That's just, you're the ranger, you've been traveling through the woods, and you've whittled yourself a little flute to sit down at the fire and just have, relax a little bit at the end of the travel.
And it's fun. That's a feature that's very fun, and I think it would very much... I think there's a lot of people that would appeal to that feature. Oh, you have chosen that feature personally?
Yes, I'm currently playtesting this in an existing campaign. So
that's funny.
I picked that one. I picked actually those top two, because it's an undead-focused campaign, and I love Forager. Friend of the Wilds.
As I say, yeah, Friend of the Wilds is Friend of the Wilds is kind of basically the same as Afters was, which is
exactly right from After.
Double proficiency in animal handling and nature skills, which that one was good, and why change something that works really well? The name's
absolutely
great too.
Oh, the name is excellent. Hello, Diadems, welcome. We're going over this homebrew I made. The next ability, Intrepid Explorer. This was so hard to write. But basically, you have advantage to your initiative rolls equal to your wisdom modifier when you travel through wilderness you have not yet explored. You gain this benefit as long as you continue to explore new areas within the wilderness, and you do not gain the benefit when backtracking or intentionally exiting the wilderness area. In addition, you have proficiency with cartographer's tools. So the whole point of here is, as long as you're going somewhere new, you get this pretty good mechanical bonus. Pretty nice.
Yeah. And it has that flavor of kind of, I picture the ranger with like the machete, like cutting through vines and like, boldly forward, here's going into the woods and kind of leading the way.
And while these mechanics, right, they all are very specialized, they're more have broader applicability. Right? This has to be new places, but new places is a pretty broad concept, right? Same with up here, right? The Deathstalker, desecrated areas, that could be anywhere, potentially, right? It's wherever undead are found, or whatever you want to do in your games. So, Mariner is another one, very straightforward. This came about half, I think, from After's mechanic. You gain proficiency with navigator's tools and vehicles water, and you have a swim speed equal to your walking speed. Additionally, you can read, write, and speak 2 languages of your choice. So just a little bit of, you learn some languages from traveling a lot, and you can swim and go with boats. So pretty much what you expect it to be. This one I have the most problems with because it might overlap too much with the sailor background, but we'll figure that out.
Yeah, there's definitely there's an argument there.
Mountain climber. You're naturally adapted to cold climates for purposes of resisting the effects of extreme cold. That's right from After's option. And you gain a climbing speed equal to your speed. So rather than cold resistance, you get a climb speed. Makes sense for climbing mountains.
And honestly, as simple as that is, I really love that, and that's a feature I would love to have on a ranger, because being able to climb is applicable in a forest. It's applicable in a cave, but having that because you are from the mountains, that's really cool.
Yeah, and this is the kind of ability that this is an easily reflavorable ability. If you want your ranger to be from jungles and you want to be able to climb, you can still just pick this feature and just ignore that it says mountain climber and be like, yes, it's now treetop explorer, right?
Jungle climber.
Easy to reflavor that, and the mechanics aren't really too lost on it. Sandwalker adapted to hot climates. It's kind of the opposite of mountain climber. And you gain proficiency with navigator's tools and vehicles land. So the idea is, right, vehicles land, it's like riding camels across the desert. It's exactly inspired by what the ability is. So
we have a Spelunker here, which is advantage on ability checks and saving throws made to overcome wilderness hazards while traveling underground. Additionally, you gain dark vision out to a range of 60 feet. If you already have it, your dark vision increases by 30 feet. This is another pretty cool one. It makes sense if you were a Spelunker and you're used to acclimated to underground areas. 30 feet of dark vision is, 60 feet. I might like that to be 30 and 30, personally.
Yeah, that was just a standard how goggles and stuff work.
But the flavor of it, I'm with you on.
Yeah, and again, dark vision, always useful. Underground, ignoring hazards, sometimes useful.
Maybe someday you'll use that.
Hey, maybe that's applicable in a dungeon, if there's a wilderness hazard in a dungeon. Like, for example, a lava flow, right? Or something like that.
Could be very cool. Maybe not.
And then, of course, the last is Swamp Treader. And this is another one I really like, but that's because I care about this a lot. You have an advantage on ability checks and saving throws made to perceive or overcome wilderness hazards while traveling through a marsh or swamp. So things like sinkhole or quicksand or what have you. In addition, you have proficiency in the Poisoner's Kit and advantage on intelligence, nature, ability checks made to harvest poison from a poisonous creature as detailed in Chapter 8 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. This is just something I really love. I always love the idea of harvesting the monsters you find, and there are mechanics for it in the Dungeon Master's Guide. And this is kind of what that's there for, is to, you read that and you say, I want to harvest poison from monsters. That sounds really cool. And then you open up the Dungeon Master's Guide and you see how it works. And you're like, all right, this is cool, right? It's one thing inspiring another. So at least that's my personal feel. I see there's some good chat going on, Pete.
I personally agree. Yeah, they're saying, Malkara was saying if you're in a mine that the mines collapse there. So that's another example of a Spelunker opportunity. Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. That's maybe a more common one than I was giving it credit for.
Difficult terrain, right? In an underground situation. Like that could be a very real situation.
So those are so taking from what they were kind of originally and where they ended up. These are very flavorful features, but they are doing what the Natural Explorer feat wanted to do, which is make you feel like you're adapted to a particular environment, but making them more generally useful, keeping the flavor, but not adding a lot of significant mechanical benefit. I think Jeremy did a great job on these.
I know I did. Thank you.
All of the there are small details here and there that maybe one could argue semantics on, but I think they're very cool. And I mean, like, for example, the Poisoner's Kit thing, I couldn't even begin to evaluate that until I reread all of the Poisoner's Kit harvesting rules and stuff.
Oh, they're really harsh. You just, like, poison yourself most of the time.
Oh, brutal.
Yeah, it's really brutal. The game does not want you to harvest poison, but with advantage, you're going to be really good at it.
You'll only poison yourself half the time, in theory.
Yeah, well, and I like what Malkara was saying there too, right? Rangers could start in a different region. It could make for a very good flavor for a character. Yeah, absolutely. Because so many of these, with the Swamp Treader is the only exception, where this is a very niche option is what it gives you. But most of these are just there's always something good here, right? There's always a generally applicable ability on these options. Even Mariner, right? It gives you 2 languages of your choice. So even if you're playing a completely landlocked campaign and you never have swimming or water or anything, those languages might be helpful. So even if you want to pick something that's just very specific to your character's backstory and don't worry about the mechanics, you're still going to get something good for it.
It's true. We want to talk about your predatory focus here.
Yeah, this is a very complicated feature. And this is probably the more, I say it's the most complicated feature, but this is probably the more contentious one. This is a replacement for Favored Enemy, and I went with the direction of completely scrapping the tracking aspect. And the reason I did that is because the spell Hunter's Mark lets you track monsters. That's something it does. That's kind of one of the core features of it, is you cast it on a thing and you can track them for an hour. I wanted to really delineate this ability from Hunter's Mark rather than saying, you have Hunter's Mark, but it's a little different. Instead, you have Predatory Focus, which does something different than Hunter's Mark. So Hunter's Mark is all about is tracking, and it gives you some bonus damage. Predatory Focus gives you bonus damage and then gives you some cool finishing moves. So the idea is, as the jaguar singles out its prey among the wild creatures of the jungle, you have learned to hunt your quarry with a singular focus. So as a bonus action, you pick a creature to focus on as your quarry. You concentrate on it as if concentrating on a spell. And as long as you're concentrating on that creature, whenever you hit it, you deal an extra d6 of damage. Okay, so it's very much like Hunter's Mark to there.
You have Hunter's Mark at will.
Yeah. However, when you hit your quarry with an attack, you can choose to end your focus and gain an additional effect of your choice. So one is for the eyes, right? And these effects are meant to be kind of like called shots, which is a class fantasy that doesn't exist in 5e, that I know a lot of people really like, right? They want to be like, I shoot him in the eyes, right? I shoot him in the leg. This lets you do that. You can be that tactful hunter who's strategically, go for the eyes, boo! Who's strategically attacking the enemy the way you want. And actually, I intentionally did put in here when you or your ranger's companion, if you have one, hit your quarry with an attack. So yes, you can have your miniature giant space hamster go for the eyes if you really want. Anyway, I digress. For the eyes, it hits the enemy in the eyes or comparable organs. For the next minute, they have disadvantage on perception checks to hide, and their passive perception is reduced, or not to hide, disadvantage on perception checks, and their passive perception is reduced by 5. And they can roll a Constitution saving throw at the end of their turns, ending the effect on a success. So you can break your concentration on your quarry to shoot them in the eyes. A cool little boost. Might be helpful for you as a ranger if you're trying to hide and you're trying to just get away. Might be really helpful if you have a rogue in the party as a way to really boost up your allies. Another one, you can break your concentration to make the wound a laming wound. Your attack cripples your quarry, hampering their movement. For the next minute, their speed is halved, including their burrowing, climbing, flying, and swimming speeds. And then at the end of each turn, they can roll a save to end the effect. A really cool way of being like, yeah, I shoot him in the leg, I'm running away, right? Or if you're kiting an enemy or something like that. Opening strike, your attack leaves the quarry off balance and vulnerable to next attack. The next attack roll made by an ally against the quarry before the end of your next turn has advantage. So I love that one personally. It's very much like Guiding Bolt, which is one of the best favorite spells in the game. And then Takedown, you just do some extra damage, and the damage increases as you level up. So you can use this Predatory Focus a number of times equal to your Wisdom modifier, and then move once, and you regain all of the expended uses on a short rest or a long rest. So the whole kind of goal here is to make an ability that you have to concentrate on, and it gives you a boost while you concentrate on it. But it also encourages you to break that concentration because you get a cool other thing, and that means you can use some of your other ranger spells that would require concentration too. Sorry, Pete, you were saying things. I've been talking for a while.
No problem. This is your child, and I think you did a great job on it. I guess if we're talking standard array, my only concern is a little bit of like the level 1 potential, I guess, of just having this every turn and picturing someone.
I was looking at it. I looked at it. It's a little much, but it's not unreasonable.
Picturing someone, for example, with a pretty, let's say they rolled stats and got really good wisdom and dexterity, having someone that's got 5 of these and can just do 5 like takedowns in a fight, because the way most of this is going to go
is only a d6 of damage each time. I mean, it's quite a bit. I'll give it to you.
2d6, so it would
at
be
6th level.
Well, an extra d6 because it's the d6 from the hit, and then so an extra d6. It's maybe a great sword, right? A great sword is 2d6. This is at best a d6 and a d8. I mean, I'm with. Well, it could be a great sword, and then you could use a great sword, and then also use this.
It's true. Yeah, it's a little strong at level 1. You're right.
It's a touch, and I think it rounds out pretty nicely as you move forward. The progression is very reasonable. The 3d6 and then the 2d6. The flavor's cool. I love Laming Wound, in particular if we're talking flavor. Like Laming Wound's another one that I think might be a little bit good. Like there's a lot of potential for, depending on your spell save DC and how much people are failing. It's a Constitution saving throw, so that's a pretty common one for enemies to be good at. So that's kind of good that it's that. But I can see like a kiting strategy by utilizing Laming Wound over again being a little bit abusive, maybe too.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. It's just a matter of, is the flavor of it right, and the idea that we are facilitating these called shots as like a concept that I think people really like. Is that worth it being maybe a little bit OP?
Yeah, and I think that it is
a little too, right?
I think that it is. I don't think this is far off.
How much is this compared to the monk? Right, the monk gets, I guess they get no key points at level 1, so level 1's pretty damn good.
Agreed. But yeah, I think that Laming Wound and maybe Takedown as well are both like on the edge, but like certainly for the eyes and opening strike, I think those are just both cool and don't really have too much of a problem with either of them. But yeah, those are on the close, but also Laming Wound is my favorite in terms of flavor. I think the idea of hitting, like, for example, a bird and its flight gets a little bit thrown off and it has a little bit of trouble moving even in a flying speed. I think that's just so cool that, like I mentioned in the rubric originally, like I would maybe be inclined to take off a point for balance of this, but I'd be inclined to give that point back as an extra point in flavor, because I think that Laming Wound works so well.
Well, and the thing that I was thinking about, right, is right now it's the save DC for this. Why not? I mean, it could just be until the end of your next turn. It doesn't feel as cool, but that could be an option for Laming Wound. It just doesn't, it only lasts a round.
Well, that could, I mean, I think that could work. I think that could definitely work.
I'm very happy with this. It makes me very happy. It's a cool new ranger option that really doesn't blow too much. I mean, level 1's a little strong, but past level 1 is pretty reasonable.
Yeah. So again, thank you to After for inspiring us with that idea, and hopefully other people are interested in contributing their own ideas and getting some stuff up in that workshop channel here on our Discord.
Well, Kara, that's exactly what I'm sorry, I just wanted to say this because the Laming Wound, that's exactly what I kind of thought as well with the using the Laming Wound, right? You're going to break your concentration to switch targets and help that ally who's getting chased down. That's kind of like,
that's like how the bear is running at your wizard and you fire like the shot and its leg, it's kind of like slows down as it's coming towards them. There's a lot of very cool.
Well, I just want one point about this is you can't switch your quarry at will with predatory focus. And that's the biggest thing of it that differentiates it from Hunter's Mark. I mean, besides, of course, the called shots. And the reason for that is just, I want this to be like a tactical option that the Ranger uses. Obviously, if there's one big bad guy, go ahead and run it, right? But you're not going to just throw this on every little monster you run into. You're not going to throw this against every zombie and skeleton you get, right? This is going to be for the big targets that you really feel like you need it for.
Yeah.
At least that's kind of the goal, right? Or maybe, right, it's the shaman, the lizard folk shaman in the back that you need to go for, or what have you.
Very cool. Very cool. Blood Use was saying, I mean, I'd sure as hell use it. Yeah, well, I mean, I would also use it. I mean, the goal is that you want to use it not because it's good, but because it's flavorful, and I think this does achieve that.
So yeah, Jeremy, that's our first one to talk about today.
Cool one. Oh, I love it. I had read this one before. Jeremy, you haven't read mine that we're going to be going into next.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you this, Jeremy, there is some spicy design in this one. It is
Pete's coming in here just full tilt, maximum spice.
I'm coming in full spice. I have no idea. I'm looking forward to another opinion on it because it's a spicy one.
Did we want to take a quick 5-minute break before we jump into that?
Before we jump into what I brought to the table today, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break, as Jeremy said. We'll be back very soon with more Fantasy Labs. Thanks for watching, everyone.